go ahead and get started here. That way Bob has plenty of time to present. I know we're all looking forward to it. All right, well, welcome everybody who's joined the call. I'm sure we'll continue to have more people trickle in. But this is another one of our Region 3 webinars. If you don't know me, I'm Abby Holovach. I'm our current Regional Vice President. We've really been trying to push out more webinars as a region, get folks, whether it's within our region and beyond, just the opportunity to have more education, more ongoing development. So anything we can do to share the love, we're going to do it. So more to come, more webinars coming down the pipeline. Just a few announcements before we let Dr. Emery get into it. So a few introductions and hellos. If you guys are not familiar with our region, this is part of our regional operating committee here. Got some few more folks on the next slide. But we've got a powerhouse of folks within Region 3. So we've got a lot of great support. So I'm really excited to continue, building our infrastructure and strengthening our connections within Region 3 because we've got so many great folks involved. Some of these people you may recognize. I'm sure a lot of you guys, in one way or another have worked with one of these folks. So back, we got plenty of ladies, but we've also got our dudes. So we've got a great group of folks in Region 3. Our region is split up, of course, into two areas. So North area chapters and our South area chapters. So currently, Keitha Molina is our North area director and Dr. Patricia Reed is our South area director. We did just, I guess, this month, we should know early in April, have elections for our new South area director. So Miss Patricia's term ends in June, and then this is a 3-year term. So we will have a new South area director soon. So we'll see how that pans out. But we're spread across Texas, Oklahoma, and Arkansas. So you can see with that red line kind of where we're split between the two between the two divisions of North and South area. So like all the other regions, we're pretty widespread. Alrighty, a few updates, a little bit of news here for you guys. So we are still accepting award nominations within Region 3. So it says submit by March 20th, but that has been pushed to April 15th. So we are still accepting award nominations. One for the Safety Professional of the Year within Region 3, and then also our Hall of Fame in particular. So we're still kind of developing the Educator of the Year, but if you know someone who'd be a great fit, don't hesitate to reach out. Like I said, we're working on that one. But Lynn Richardson is our Awards and Honors Chair. So if you have any questions, you need help with the nomination process, you can always reach out to Lynn, but this is all also on our Region 3 website page. So you could go in here and also just fill out these forms online. You can self-nominate, you can nominate someone else, have at it. But April 15th, so if you know someone worthy, get in there and make that happen for them. We are actively planning a 2027 Student Leadership Conference. So we sent out a link with a survey. And this QR code also takes you to the same survey, and we'll continue to share it through the month of April. But we're trying to get kind of a pulse, a feel for what students, faculty, maybe new professionals, what do they want to see in an event like this? It's probably gonna be a day and a half long, a mix of, we're hoping, different hands-on activities, panels, networking, poster presentations. So we're trying to find ways to make this valuable as possible for the students, and really looking at it from their perspective. What would I have wanted as a new professional? What would have better equipped me for coming into the real world? So again, we're trying to solicit feedback so we can make this the best SLC we've had. So please, if you or someone has some valuable input, feel free to pass this along. It's also on our LinkedIn page. It's also on our Region 3 page. 2 more webinars coming up. I just posted this one over here in April. So I'm actually speaking for the Pensacola chapter. This is a Zoom meeting, but this is talking about HAZWOPER 101. So really going into who needs what type of HAZWOPER and when. It's one of those things a lot of companies end up getting confused and thinking everybody needs a 40-hour, but they actually don't. So we're going to kind of go through the minutia of how do you make that determination? So your people are getting the training they need without you spending excess money on something that's not really applicable. So that's another free webinar coming up. And then in May, we've got another one. where another ethics, so professional conduct and clear values, upholding ethical behavior. So this is also available right now for you to go online and register for that one as well. CEUs as well pending there. So we're trying to again create as many opportunities for you guys to get those education credits and just professional development. And then, of course, last but not least, we have our Region 3 PDC coming up in September. So, still a little bit of a ways off, but this year's flying by. We're already almost in April. So, it'll be here before you know it. We're about to release the speaker slate within the next month or so. So, we've got a lot of great things in store. So, if you're interested in attending, exhibiting, sponsoring, we're accepting all the things right now. So get on our website, check that out, see what you're interested in. We're also offering there's a discount code if you wanted to make this a family event and bring your family, the couple days beforehand. So should be a lot of fun, definitely different than what we've done in the past, but it's going to be awesome. So add that to your calendar and get registered. Now, on a more somber note, we did recently receive word, you may have seen this on our LinkedIn page, but Mike Thompson recently passed away. He's a previous Region 3 vice president, very active member within ASSP and just in the safety profession as a whole. So, really sad news that we got that last week. Region 3 is looking to make a donation to the ASSP Foundation on his behalf. So if you're looking for ways to honor Mike, that's another great way to do it, no matter how small or how large of a donation you make. So I know that, his family would greatly appreciate that. So we did also on the LinkedIn page include some of the memorial information. So if that's something that you're interested in, that information is there. I've mentioned it a few times. If you're not already connected with our LinkedIn page, please do, because we share not only Region 3 events, but our chapter events and beyond. So even other region and chapter events we've been sharing. So there's no reason you shouldn't be able to get CEUs that you need for your certification renewals. So right for the picking. At the end of Dr. Emery's presentation, so probably the last 10 minutes or so, I will drop in the chat a link for two different things. So there's actually two links. One is for basically our roll call, which is what you see here, your first name and your last name and your email. That's how I'm going to send you the link for your CEU retrieval. And then there will also be another one just for a session review. So if you wouldn't mind taking a few minutes and completing that as well, we'd really appreciate that. So again, last 10 minutes, check the chat. I'll also let you know, but these will be dropped in there. So please complete that if you need that CEU and want that CEU credit. And with that, those are the announcements I have. So I'm going to go ahead and let you take it away, Bob. I'm going to stop sharing. I know, people have definitely been excited for this. Like you said, got a lot of folks who need credits for their certifications. So really appreciate you being here to do this for us.
Sure. Yeah, my pleasure. So keep me honest here because I'm going to share my screen and hopefully you are seeing PowerPoint instead of my ugly mug. Is that
Yes,
correct?
you are
Okay.
successful.
All right, there we go. Okay. All
Yes.
right. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for the opportunity to chat with you guys. A few introductory comments here. So my background here at the University of Texas Health Science Center, Houston, is a bit unusual that I'm the safety guy 80% of my time. So that's over traditional environmental health and safety where there's uh, exotic exposures such as radioactive materials, infectious agents, hazardous chemicals, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff, along with the standard issue occupational safety stuff. But then I fell asleep in a meeting and woke up and inherited risk management and insurance and also employee health. So the larger group I'm over is that spectrum of issues, which has given me or afforded me an opportunity to really understand that the spectrum of issues that we deal with. So that's 80%, and then 20% of my time is my faculty appointment at the University of Texas School of Public Health, which has been beneficial because it allows me to work with a lot of students and really smart faculty where we explore different topics collectively. And we've worked on some projects that have been interesting and actually resulted in publications and the like. So you may ask yourself, as a practicing safety professional, and those of you that are actually board certified, um, what is the deal with the ethics of that? Why is it that we now have to have so much training in the ethical foundations of our business? And I guess what I'd like to do is start off by saying that this is not something unique to the safety profession, because I run in these different circles, and this has been present in the industrial hygiene sector for quite some time. It's also now prevalent in the health physics sector. Also, biosafety is now soon to require this as well, but also in other professions as well. And one of the areas I'm interested right now in is these various other professions that require some sort of refresher regarding the ethical obligations for someone who portrays or proclaims themselves to be a professional in that field, whatever their field of expertise is. And so uh, I will tell you, as truth in advertising, my wife is the senior associate dean at the School of Public Health, and here at UT. So that means she's my boss 150% of the time. But but she has mentioned on many occasions during the accreditation and reaccreditation of the school, and it's not just the school, but all schools, uh, the accreditation group is looking for elements in the academic training of public health and safety professionals where ethical considerations are covered. And so it is my impression that what's happening here, and this is just Bob's commentary, that it's being that the notion of some ethical training is being driven at the academic level, and then the professional organizations are saying, wait a minute, let's make sure that folks at our level are being refreshed on our obligations as professionals. And again, this is not limited to the safety profession. It could be medical, legal, the media. Actually, that's a project I'm working on right now, is the ethical obligation of the media, engineering, and the like. So that's kind of where it's coming from. I don't know if that helps or hurts, but I just my commentary there. So what I would like to do is talk to you a little bit, kind of a brief refresher on what ethics is, and then hone in on a case study that I was personally involved with, but it has to do with this whole concept of misinformation. And this is a big issue that we all have to deal with in this day of information flowing uncontrolled in a variety of directions. But there are some actual strategies that we can use ethically to try to counter misinformation without trying to jam it down people's throats. And then I'll give you some strategies that I found in the literature, and then give you some references, validated references. If you have a greater interest in this area or you're encountering this in your field, and we'll leave some time for Q&A, and we'll do the best we can to try to address these issues. So first of all, there's several definitions for ethics. It's a set of moral principles or values, the principles of conduct of governing an individual or group. I like that one the most, by the way, or conforming to accepted professional standards of conduct. But this last quote from a colleague, Dr. Larry Whitehead, who recently retired from the School of Public Health, he summed it up pretty well. We were talking one day, and he said, if a situation involves risk, then it involves ethics. And that's pretty profound, because as safety professionals, we have an ethical obligation to protect individuals so they can go home as healthy and as safe they came in the door. And so as we evaluate these various risks that employees are being exposed to, we have to keep that in mind because there are ethical dimensions to that. Now, all good safety people probably sleep with the code of conduct, the board of safety professionals code of conduct underneath their pillows each night. But what I did was I thought, what's interesting is you can do this thing called a word cloud, where you just copy and paste the verbiage from some statement, and then the size of the word will represent how often it's used. And this was interesting to me because, and this is done by Wordle.net, by the way. And notice that for the BCSP word cloud, the term professional shows up uh, very pronounced. Similarly, if we do this thing for the industrial hygiene group, lo and behold, the term professional shows up also. And then now, well, because the example we're going to use here in a little bit for this case study involves radiation. Here's the word cloud for health physics. And again, other than the acronym CHP, professional shows up over and over again. So what and by the way, I will pause and tell you it's kind of I guess a marketing ploy. I don't know, but um, I am in my spare time cobbling together a presentation on the ethics of the groups that safety people, the professions that safety people interact with a lot. And I think it would be very interesting to do the same exercise with groups such as the medical community, the legal community, the media, engineering, and potentially governmental elected officials. It would be really interesting to see what is it that they proclaim as their ethical standards. I think that would be interesting, but that's in my spare time, I'll tinker with that. Okay, so anyhow, let's go back to the word professional. So what does it mean to be a professional? And I spent a lot of time in graduate education, and I can never remember a time where we sat down and had a course and talked, or at least a lecture about this. So it's been enlightening for me. So, but we probably know some of these things intuitively that someone who's a professional is considered to be trustworthy, knowledgeable, and insightful. Uh, they're altruistic and accountable. They have a sense of duty and they strive for excellence. They make ethical choices. They're intellectual. They accept large individual responsibility. Uh, they maintain high reliability under various degrading factors or pressure, if you think about it. And they dedicate one's skills to the well-being of others. I think those are all observations that all of us could agree upon as we think about someone who is a professional. The expectations of a professional is to adhere to socially acceptable standards and norms of practice in exchange for the power that society confers on them. And I don't have time to get into all of that, but think about when you go to the doctor, you expect that individual who's licensed and certified or whatever will be you're conveying a certain power to them in hopes that you're going to get good health care. And the same thing with an attorney and other professional practices as well. That is the expectation of someone who is designated as a professional. And I would argue that a safety professional falls right into that category as well. So now to the case study here. Um, it's clear that there's going to be public apprehension about health and safety issues. It's going to be there. It's not going away. And the question becomes, how do we communicate with and educate the public so that prudent decisions can be made based on facts rather than emotion? And I got immersed in this whole issue and trying to counteract some misinformation. And that's an important term, and I'm going to define it for you here in a second. But we should ask ourselves, what does the science tell us about risk communications and this notion of misinformation? So I started out as a radiation safety guy, and that's where this case study is going to go here in a second. But first, let's go to the concept of misinformation. So Cook and Lewandowski defined it. I think this is eloquent, that the way they should describe this. It's information that people have acquired that turns out to be incorrect, irrespective of why and how the information was acquired in the first place. And so in the popular media right now, when you hear the term misinformation, it is perceived, in my opinion, as something that was purposefully planted. But in fact, according to Cook and Lewandowski, it could be incorrect. It could have been something that perhaps was thought to be true at one point and now is not. But the important point here is the second bullet, that once information is acquired, the studies show that it's very difficult to remove the influence of that information. And I'm going to wrap up this show with at least the strategies that Cook and Lewandowski and others suggest for possible use when you encounter a situation, and all to be done in an ethical way. So here's what happened. I think everybody on this call remembers the tragic events in Japan, and everybody remembers it as Fukushima, but it was the great Japanese earthquake. There were tremendous loss of life, on and on and on. I won't go into the details there, but I started out as a radiation person. One of the concerns was that radioactive material was being released both atmospherically and in the water in the Pacific Ocean, that it was clear that some amount of that material will eventually reach the US. It'll come all the way across the Pacific. And so I was asked to serve with a group that, ironically enough, was picked to meet in Houston, Texas. We actually hosted the meeting where it was a group of experts, and I'll get to the pictures here in a little bit. And that the idea was between the Health Physics Society, which would be the radiation group, kind of like the American Society of Professional Safety Professionals or the Industrial Hygiene Group. It's a bunch of practicing professionals. Get those folks together and let's get the facts. What are the facts of the case? What do we know? What do we not know? How do we put this information in perspective? And so we hosted that. And as part of that, the group that was organizing it, which was the Nuclear Energy Institute, so it was the Health Physics Society and the NEI, Nuclear Energy Institute, they had a press release, which is what I'm showing you here on the slide. And it was a press release for a paper that had been circulated to the major newspapers and media groups as we spoke. And they merely asked, can you look at this paper and tell us your opinion? They didn't influence anything. They just said, this is what the press release says. If you could tell us what you think. And I love the title here, Medical Journal article, 14,000 deaths tied to Fukushima disaster fallout. It's seen roughly comparable to Chernobyl in a major new article in the December 2011 edition of the International Journal of Health Services. Okay, so that's our homework assignment. Read this thing and see what you think. So to summarize, what they did was these researchers, and I'm putting that in air quotes, examined the Center for Disease Control, what's called the Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report, that some of you may be familiar with, where they collect data on all sorts of diseases and injuries and things like that. And what this group did was look at death data for the period of 14 weeks in 2010, which was the year before the Fukushima event, and then in 2011, the same 14-week period. And that was after the Fukushima event. And what they noted statistically was that there was a 4.46% increase in deaths after radioactivity was detected in the US. And then the authors went on to speculate that the cause of this increase in deaths was due to exposure of radioactivity from Fukushima. Okay, that's a that's a synopsis of this paper that was being publicized to all these media outlets. So if we kind of take a step back and say, wait a minute, what's going on here? It's a limited comparison of this mortality data over 1 year from 2010 to 2011. And is this really an increase in deaths, or perhaps the population actually grew? There was no denominator. The population maybe grew by 4.46%. Another option is these deaths that were noted, could they be due to anything else? Maybe like coronary heart disease, cancer, stroke, blah, blah, blah. Why was this thing published in a health services journal and not a radiological or epidemiological journal? I have my own opinions on why that is. And then there was no information noted about author affiliation that would reveal any possible conflicts of interest. So when I was asked to do this homework assignment, I just thought, well, let's Google up who these authors are. And lo and behold, they're affiliated with a group called radiation.org. And so if you go to this group, lo and behold, it's it's called the Radiation and Public Health website, and it doesn't take long. I'll leave it to you to scan through it if you're so interested. But it's a group that pretty much doesn't like radiation, and their spokesperson, interestingly enough, is Christy Brinkley. There's the cut and paste, and I'll leave it to you guys to sort through from there. Okay, so this is a bit problematic when there's by the way, the guy Joseph Mangano is the lead author on this thing, who's a master's prepared epidemiologist who is doing something that, with regard to ethics, needs to be considered. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. So it boils down to, is this sound science or does it sound like science? And that's a great quote by Dr. David Michaels. Some of you may be familiar with his work. He was former head of DOE and I believe OSHA for a bit. He wrote a interesting book called Doubt is Their Product, and it's in the reference list that I'll give you at the end of this presentation there. So there actually is a name for this. This is called Lysenkoism. And Trofim Lysenko was a Soviet agronomist who claimed to have developed a technique that would triple crop yields in the Soviet Union. But his claims were not based in any objective science and ultimately resulted almost in the entire collapse of the agricultural community in the Soviet Union. Yet he garnered favor of the authorities because of his way he was pitching this stuff. So Lysenkoism is a term that's used to describe the manipulation or distortion of the scientific process in a way to reach a predetermined conclusion as dictated by ideological bias or other related to social or political objectives. For those Texans that are on this call, the term we use here in Texas, it's the Texas sharpshooter. And that's where the person goes out in the field and shoots some holes in the side of the barn and then goes up and paints the target around it. And then if they don't like the way it turned out, just modify the way you paint it, and then that's fine. So that's what's going on here in this regard. And these techniques, unethical as they may be, were also used by big tobacco and some of the other firms that there's lengthy movies about the transgressions here, but where these organizations would demand science produce absolute certainty of the presence or absence of risk. How many times did we hear growing up, there's no specific study that shows that smoking cigarettes resulted in cancer in this particular individual. So, or they just manufacture uncertainty. they fund or hire researchers to selectively reanalyze data and then focus on this notion of lack of scientific uncertainty. Uh, they fail to reveal sources of funding or affiliation. And then you always want to seize upon the media's need for balanced reporting, regardless of the legitimacy of the other side of that reporting that is necessary. And that's all summarized from Dr. Michael's book. So, with regard to this paper, let's go back to the case study. After reading this paper, everyone had headed back to their host locations, and I tried to correspond by email saying, "What are we going to do about this?" Because I think this information is somewhat harmful. It's almost like, um, hollering fire in a crowded uh, theater. That could be very problematic. And so, typical of the academics, they said, well, we have to write a letter to the journal, and, letter to the editor. And I was like, wait a minute, this can cause damage right away. So you guys do that. So I actually published 4 days after this press release. This is the item that I wrote up, and I'll just summarize it for you. But essentially saying that as a part of this, they were showing data for the number of deaths in Houston. And I went out personally to measure for any radioactivity during this period, and we never detected any, yet they were asserting with all their data how many deaths there were in Houston due to this, and it wasn't the case. So I would argue that the whole thing was flawed in how it got published, but the damage was already done at that point. And so I'll get to the punchline here in a little bit, that how this misinformation can cause great concern. It was 3 months later that Dr. Robert Peter Gale, who was on this panel, and Dr. Hoffman, who had both been in Japan and actually interviewed the workers and the recovery folks as well, where they wrote an op-ed piece in the LA Times talking about, despite the concerns about exposure, the damaged nuclear power plant was unlikely to cause an increase in cancers. And then it was not until 8 months later where the letter from the rest of the group went to the journal itself, and then they are obligated ethically that if there's a paper that's published and people refute what the paper says, then they appropriately ask the authors to respond. And here's Mangano's response that while you guys were bantering about this, we've just modified our number. So it's not just 14,000 people, it's now 22,000 people that we think have died, that we assert or postulate have died due to the radiation exposure from this event. Okay, so why do I tell you that whole story? Well, this is just one example of many sources of misinformation that are available, many on the web. And I suspect every person on this call has dealt with someone who is concerned about their exposures and hunted up information on the web, which may or may not be legitimate. And these are publications or postings by, I love this buzz term, crusaders, critics, and conspiracy theorists that serve to weaken the messages made by qualified experts, of which, by the way, if you're on this web call, you are now a qualified expert, because that's the reason behind the notion of board certification, which I'll pause there for a second. If you think about it, the term certification, if you look it up in a dictionary, the layman's terms will say qualified in the eyes of their peers to do what they say they do. And that's pretty profound, that others who are in a peer position have said, yeah, this person has demonstrated some capability to be able to say they are equally board certified or whatever. So with so many inaccurate and deceptive sources of information, Dr. Kata is notable because she was involved in the whole issue of vaccine denial. That officials speak with any special authority or knowledge is a concept now rejected by lay people. as readers encountering expertise may believe themselves to be experts as well. To me, to put that in layman's terms, that everybody who has access to YouTube is a plumber, right? Well, that doesn't exactly work that way. So, and my wife has lectured me about that. When I try to go to YouTube University to fix something simple, sometimes it doesn't work. So anyhow, okay, so what do we do about it? Well, one of the things ethically is that we need to be cognizant of words that work. And some of you may be familiar with the work by Dr. Frank Luntz. I've actually met the guy. And he wrote a book called Words That Work. And it's very interesting. His pitch line is, it's not what you say, it's what they hear. And he has certain political leanings, and I'm not going to get into all that, but his technique is very interesting because we were put in the Luntz lab to work on the messaging with regard to the Fukushima event. And it was an interesting experience because what you did was each person was brought out and he would interview you in front of a group of about 30 people. And those individuals had a dial and they would turn the dial up or down depending on whether they agreed or disagreed with what it was you were talking about. And what he's learned through his research is that there's certain words, trigger words, that people will head off in one direction or another. And then once that happens, it's very difficult to get them back. So, for example, that if during your discussions you use the word power, people find that negative, but energy is okay. If you use the word plant, so think of nuclear power plant, they don't like the word power and they don't like the word plant because plant looks or is perceived as industrial and dirty or whatever. But facilities is okay. Something that people really like is total accountability and transparency. And so, in going through this exercise, I was asked to go back out. And if some of you may remember, during this time period is just when the new X-ray machines were being deployed at the airports, and there were concerns about the radiation dose and also what people could see behind the X-ray image and all that kind of stuff. And so I was asked, I'm going to ask you about the radiation dose that you receive from going through this security screening. And my response is, well, I normally say, oh, how much radiation dose you get just for being alive, and then let's compare that to the dose you're receiving for this necessary security review. And the response was, that's great, but watch what happens if you first preface your comment with, as a radiation safety professional, I take any exposure to radiation seriously. Now let's talk about this. And I was actually able to see the collective output as I was answering the question, as I was sitting in front of this focus group. And it was pretty amazing because the results went through the roof. And afterwards, I said, wow, that's kind of weird in a way. It feels like I'm manipulating people. And their response was, no, you're not manipulating people. You're just giving the facts a fighting chance. And that's what really struck me because I thought, the safety community in general needs to be made aware of this so that we can at least get a fighting chance when we're trying to articulate what we believe is the appropriate thing to protect individuals. Another thought to keep in mind is this notion of the familiarity background effect, where if people are somewhat familiar with a topic, they already have preconceived notions. So I'm going to stick with the radiation example here. I realize a lot of people on this call are not radiation folks, so I'm getting you out of your comfort zone. But so if we talk about the common misperceptions of food irradiation, most people think that if my food is treated with exposure to radiation, that it somehow could make it radioactive. And so when we're refuting that misinformation, you don't want to mention the wrong information that'll only reinforce this. In other words, don't say a radiation won't make your food radioactive. Rather, you could say the procedure eliminates dangerous pathogens and makes your food safer. So, because if they keep hearing the negative terms over and over again, it just reinforces it and kind of loses the rest of that messaging. Another interesting concept with Cook and Lewandowski is that we assume that if we have more counter arguments, that we are more likely to correct a misinformation. But their studies show that three counter arguments are better than 12. If you keep piling on more and more information, all it does is cause the folks to re-entrench the original misconception, and it's not going to work. So limit your speaking points or whatever it is you're trying to convey to perhaps three counter arguments. And then there are situations where people just have strongly fixed views, and regardless of your counter arguments, it's not going to work. So if you're conducting outreach or trying to convey to a larger group, just understand there's a focus on the undecided majority rather than the unswayable minority. And there are some buzz terms there. Every time I get involved in a risk communications group, I love it when someone gets up and says, the risk is low. Well, the problem is you already said the word risk. And so when people hear risk, they say, oh, something bad's going to happen one way or another. So these are terms that we need to think about as we go about our activities in trying to affect change or impact, where, again, keeping in mind what we want to do is help people go home as healthy and as safe as they came in the door. Now, when people hear misinformation, they build a mental model. Whether it's right or not is another challenge. But if there's a myth in there somewhere and it's debunked, like, no, that's not the cause of what's going on here, that leaves a mental gap. And so these studies that they've conducted show that people prefer an incorrect model over an incomplete model. So what you have to do there is make sure you fill the gap. So if someone thinks I'm being exposed to X and I have these physical symptoms, the physical symptoms are real. That's not debatable. You've got that. But now let's go back and talk about what else could be causing these symptoms. There could be a variety of reasons for why you're having that. So think about how the gap might be filled rather than just refuting that you're not having these, whatever the issues of the day might be. Now, just to bring you back home, this is not just a radiation issue. Some of you may be familiar with uh, the, the whole issue of the anti-vaccine thing here, and it's interesting that some clever folks had made a website on how many vaccine preventable illnesses may be uh, caused by a crusade that get children not vaccinated. I won't go into all the gory details there, but the point is misinformation is a larger public health issue that all of us need to consider. And it's always a personal choice. I'm certainly cognizant of that, but the at least to be able to provide some basic information on uh, what does the data actually speak to rather than what are the perceptions there as well. This is a Jenny McCarthy, and her, I believe her son was diagnosed with autism at an early age. I think at age 2. I'm going to get the facts a little bit screwed up here, but the point is that it also happened to be that phase of life is where uh, a certain series of vaccines are administered, but also when it's typical to diagnose autism. So um, learned individuals had said that it could have been a happenstance that these two things occurred, but more importantly, the overall public health concern is much larger. That just something to consider for parents to consider. Okay, there's other health and safety issues that are prime for misinformation, toxic mold. I see a big one in nanoparticles. One of my favorite modern terms is genetically modified organisms. Um, emerging and emerging infectious diseases, industrial emissions of all kinds, and I'm sure there's many others. And I welcome your commentary when you can send in emails, and we can add to this list. But uh, misinformation can certainly abound out there. So to summarize here, I think misinformation regarding health and safety issues exists and will continue to circulate. I would argue it's our ethical obligation to be attuned to it and to, in a respectful way, figure out how we might equip individuals to at least make informed choices. Um, and by relying on the science behind effective risk communications, I'll go back to that comment that I was given. It's not about manipulating people, it's about giving the facts a fighting chance. If you have a greater interest in this field, these are the references I use to create this presentation, but there are many others out there. And this is an area I've been working in for a little bit. We've published a few papers in it. And I think that because there's now a need for 5 hours per recertification cycle, it'll probably be important to think about new content. So I would just encourage those that are on this call, if you've encountered ethical dilemmas, please email a summary, de-identified, email that information, because that could be a fertile territory for the development of new learning material as we go forward. So I think that's all I have here. So I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to turn it back over to our host. And I don't
Here I
know if,
am.
oh, there you go. And I don't know if there's questions, or tell me what it is you would like for me to do, ma'am.
Absolutely. So,
Oh,
to note everyone, I did just drop those goodies in the chat. So make sure you
mm,
click those links, take care of yourself there for your CEUs.
mm,
There weren't any questions dropped in the chat, but if you have questions right now, please come off of mute and feel
mm,
free if you want to jump in here. We've got
mm,
another, 10 minutes or so.
mm. Okay. Or everybody can put their head on their desk and take a nap for 10 minutes.
No.
Oh, no.
No, I think the way
Mm,
you present it though, it just is
mm,
like an interesting point in
mm,
general. You may have the right answer to something, but it's all about how it's presented. And so it's like that there's an art to that. I think that like you said, you can hammer on with all the facts you want, but
mm,
if it's not framed in a certain way and we don't
mm,
take care with our verbiage,
mm.
it's not going to be well received regardless.
Right. People need to feel is that they have the final decision, but
Yeah.
our job is to equip them with the options and to say, here's what we do here at this place. So, you pick the problem of the day, but um, at the end of the day, the decision is yours.
Yep.
So I think that because when people try to impose a decision on others, that's where they're going to dig in their heels. And now you
Yeah.
really got issues. So,
Not a desirable outcome.
mhm.
Yeah. Hey, Abby, this is Karen McClenny. Thank you for
Yeah.
this presentation. It was amazing.
Mm,
And I agree. I never really thought about the psychology behind using the proper verbiage. I
mm,
mean, I do remember when I was a new mom and I was looking through like the best way to explain things to our kids. And they would say, don't run. You would
mm,
say, walk. And
mm,
so it kind of reminds me a little bit about that. And it's something that you don't think about applying when
mm,
you're at the workplace. So thank you for
mm.
sharing this.
Okay. My
Yeah.
pleasure. Thank you.
That is a good analogy.
I'm going to use that at work today. I'm going to,
Action item.
yeah.
Anybody else got anything? Anything you want to throw in there? Any things you're thinking about? Reminds you of something you've seen?
I am curious whether folks have encountered, again, de-identified, please, but if they've encountered ethical misinformation in their workplace. Just simple examples of people coming in saying, "Oh, I can't do this," or whatever. Um, I'm sure there are a lot of those things. I've spent most of my career in academia, so I'm not out in industry, but it's got to be out there, right? And no one. Let me put it to you this way: no one is going to debate gravity. If you're 100 feet in the air, I don't think we're going to debate how much it's going to hurt if you fall. But other sorts of issues where people say, well, I saw this on the online or whatever. I don't believe this, or I think this is causing this. That's got to be prolific in the field, I would think. I don't.
Well, this is Karen again,
Mm,
and in my line of work of what we contribute to the world of safety is developing OSHA compliant safety incentive programs. And the biggest hurdle is it was put out there years ago that OSHA does not like safety incentive programs
mm,
because their concern is that they will promote injury hiding.
mm,
However, they retracted that and said that they think it's a great safety tool as long as they're designed and implemented in a way that does not promote injury hiding.
mm,
And I've been doing this for about 26 years and I still come up against that. And so I'm just, it's that information that's out there. And that, I think that might be an example of what you're talking about here.
mm. No, I think, it's funny. I shouldn't say funny. I mean, it's interesting you bring that up because I'm over workers' comp here at the university. And one of the areas I was concerned about was underreporting. And so every year we do a little simple survey of these targeted groups. So one year we do a survey of all the people who use source of radiation. Are you getting the information you need? Are you, blah, 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 blah. Just 6 or 8 questions. And one year we did a survey of people who reported injuries. But kind of interesting survey. And if I remember the number right, the question we asked was, prior to the injury event, were you aware of your obligation to report the injury? And 88% said yes. That's the first time I'd ever seen any data saying I knew during the initial training, I knew I was supposed to report this. And then another question we asked was, to your knowledge, has the situation or issue been addressed that, was cause of your injury? And it was like 80% said yes. So it was really interesting to kind of put your finger on some data to say exactly the point you're bringing up, that I think if you have an open channel of communication, uh, it actually leads to an improved culture of safety over time because people know it's being addressed, it's being heard and being addressed.
Right,
Would you
right,
agree?
absolutely.
Yeah.
And one of the avenues of that is if organizations can share with their employees their
Mm-hmm.
non-retaliation policy,
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to reporting,
Mm-hmm.
that they are protected.
Yep.
And that's one way to kind of get over that little hurdle. But yes,
Yeah.
I understand exactly what you're saying. We work with some surveys similar. So yeah,
Yeah.
thank you.
Right. It's making the response visible, but also applauding the folks for bringing it up and get it fixed and let's go on. Let's keep in mind what is our ultimate goal here is to help you guys go home as healthy and safe as you came in the door.
Yeah.
And we
Amen.
yeah, we just have to well, we have to repeat that mantra. It reminds me, I go out and do these reviews of safety programs in universities, and it reminds me of the old married couple where the woman says, "You don't tell me you love me anymore." And the husband says, "Look, 30 years ago when we got married, I told you I love you. If anything changes, I'll let you know." And sometimes we need to, maybe reinforce that we do care about you and we are trying to help you. Would you agree with that analogy? Maybe I'll make a bumper sticker out of
There you go.
I love it. I love it.
Okay, there you go. You can take that one there. The University of Texas just gave you something there. How about that? Your tax dollars at work. How about that? Okay. Anything else from our listening public.
Well, thank you so much for doing this for us. I know I learned a lot. Just it's always about how can we, rework and reframe how we think and how we communicate, and then doors open that, maybe we didn't even realize that were closed. So, learned a lot. We'll share this after the fact. This meeting is being recorded, so we'll put this on our YouTube page. So if you know somebody who would benefit from this webinar, which, every safety professional would, feel free to link it to them, share it with them, and again, just share the love there. So thank you so much. We really appreciate you, Bob.
Okay, yeah, my pleasure. All
Bob's
right.
the bomb.
Oh, there you go. Safety Bob is on the job.
There you go.
All right, take care, you guys. All right,
All
we'll
right.
see you. All right,
Thank
bye.
you.
Bye.